Jurassic Park from 1993. Based on the book by Michael Crichton, it's probably the most iconic movie from the 90s. And I think most people from my generation consider it to be a favorite. I was 9 years old when it came out, and I did not see it in theaters. I watched it as soon as it was available to rent on VHS. And like most people, I was pretty blown away by it. It was a big deal. Nobody had seen anything like this before. It was a good mixture of practical effects and CGI. And this is the early days of CGI, yet so much of it still holds up pretty well today. I'm sure you feel the same way, but I feel like I've seen modern movies with bigger budgets than this, and the CGI is somehow not as good. I'm not saying the CGI in Jurassic Park is flawless, but for the time, it was flawless. This is 1993, and I know I was only 9 years old, but at least for the duration of the movie, I pretty much believed that I was watching real dinosaurs. But even if the effects weren't good, I still think this would be a pretty great movie because, much like Jaws, there's a lot of emphasis on characters. It's not just a mindless monster movie. There's a lot of great character stuff, and there's themes of technology and science and greed. It's basically all about man's reach exceeding his grasp, which is a recurring theme in a lot of Michael Crichton's stories. And needless to say, it all comes together in a really satisfying way. However, there are still a few things for me to poke fun at in this one, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm also going to be making some comparisons between the movie and the book. It's been a while since I've read the book, but there are quite a few differences, and I may make reference to that as we go. But I think we should just get started. Jurassic Park from 1993, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum, and Richard Attenborough. The movie opens up on some moving branches, and you think you're about to see a huge dinosaur right off the bat, but it's really just a bunch of Jurassic Park workers in hard hats moving a crate with a large velociraptor inside of it. They're trying to put the dinosaur in the raptor enclosure, and Robert Muldoon is introduced. He's the park's game warden, which is a title that sounds like a 12-year-old's Xbox Live gamer tag. And he looks like if Bear Grylls had a baby with Indiana Jones. And the location is revealed. Isla Nublar, an island 120 miles west of Costa Rica. The gatekeeper is named Joffrey. He opens the gate and allows the raptor to proceed inside the enclosure. Why this thing has to be manually opened, I'll never know. Like, why can't it just be like an automated garage door? The entire park is automated, but they gotta have some big dude climb on top of this fucking cage just to lift up the door. And of course, the raptor attacks the gatekeeper. It grabs him and pulls him in. Muldoon tries to save him, but Joffrey dies. Tragic. And then we jump over to an amber mine in the Dominican Republic, and a corporate lawyer named Donald Gennaro is introduced. If you haven't read the book, would you believe me if I told you that this character is one of the heroes? Both he and Alan Grant are like the main characters of the book. However, the movie is different. And no offense to this actor, but it would be weird if this guy was one of the main heroes. And he shouldn't be a hero anyway, because he's a lawyer. And he's not like a To Kill a Mockingbird lawyer. He's a corporate dickhead lawyer. So I'm glad the movie changed this aspect around a little bit. And you might recognize the actor as the guy that John Candy tried to rent a room from in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And Gennaro says the park's owner, John Hammond, is facing a $20 million lawsuit from the family of poor Joffrey. And the investors have a lot of doubts about the park. And they should. It's a theme park full of fucking dinosaurs. I mean, what are we doing here? But apparently, the investors will be satisfied if a mere 2 experts inspect the park and endorse it. Which seems unlikely, but okay. And it jumps over to Montana. Paleontologist Dr. Alan Grant and paleobotanist Dr. Ellie Sattler are introduced. And they are in the process of digging up some dinosaur bones, as I'm sure they do pretty often. But on this occasion, they're attempting to view a skeleton of a raptor that's buried underground with some new radar system. They examine it on the monitor, and Grant says it's about 5 or 6 feet tall and about 9 feet long, which of course is much bigger than raptors were in real life. But that's okay. None of us knew that at the time the movie was released, so it's fine. And Grant suggests similarities between raptors and birds, which is not at all a controversial opinion now, but I guess it could have been back then, because everyone in this scene laughs at the notion. And some random child says that it doesn't look very scary. It's more like a 6-foot turkey, which is stupid, because a 6-foot turkey would be fucking terrifying. Regular-sized turkeys are kind of terrifying. This kid has obviously never encountered a pissed-off turkey. And Grant has this look on his face like he's about to just annihilate this kid. He explains the nature of raptors and how they are pack hunters. Not exactly sure how he could possibly know that. I don't know how he's being so specific about the way raptors hunt, but he is. I mean, it's not like he's actually observed them, at least not yet. And he takes out a raptor claw, and he shows how a raptor would slash at him by kind of gently brushing the claw across the kid's belly. And it seems like he even does it to the kid's groin area. I think it's maybe time to call the police, because that is a little fucked up, is it not? And obviously this kid's mom and dad aren't here, because I'm pretty sure Grant would have gotten his ass kicked over this. But whatever. Grant and Ellie get to talking about kids. Ellie would like to have them someday, but Grant is opposed. Oh, by the way, Grant and Ellie are in a relationship. I figured I'd mention it because it's not that obvious. And they aren't in a relationship in the book. Grant is more like a teacher, and Ellie is kind of like an apprentice. But in the movie, they're much closer in age, and they're dating. And Grant doesn't want to have kids because they're messy, expensive, and they smell. And look, it's none of my business. But personally, I think he has a point, especially in this situation. I mean, what sounds like more fun to you? Raising smelly kids for the next 18 years, or digging up dinosaurs and having sex? I know what I'd pick. That's all I'm saying. And by the way, I'm not saying that those two activities should be happening at the same time. They're two separate activities. Digging up dinosaurs and having sex should not happen at the same time. The sex having should happen either before or after the digging up of the dinosaurs. Just want to be clear on that. And suddenly a helicopter lands near Ellie and Grant's trailer, and John Hammond is introduced. He teleports from the helicopter into the trailer. Seriously, somehow he's already inside when they get there. And he says that he owns an island off the coast of Costa Rica, and he spared no expense. And he describes it as a nature preserve, which is funny, because there's nothing natural about Jurassic Park. And he says his attractions will drive kids out of their minds. Is that a good thing? Do we need a bunch of psychologically damaged children running around on a remote island? I don't know. But that's exactly what's going to happen. And he wants Ellie and Grant to sign off on the park and endorse it. Grant asks what kind of park it is, and Hammond doesn't really answer him. But he offers to fully fund his dig for another 3 years. So basically he's bribing them. I mean, aren't you going to be more inclined to leave a positive review if you're getting something out of it? I would say yes. And now we jump over to San Jose, Costa Rica, and Dennis Nedry is introduced. He's Jurassic Park's one IT guy, and he's meeting a guy named Dodson. We know this because Nedry says it several times.
You shouldn't use my name.
Dodson! Dodson! We've got Dodson here! See, nobody cares. Nice hat. You're trying to look like a secret agent?
And Dodson works for a rival company. He gives Nedry a bunch of money, and in exchange, he wants Nedry to use a secret agent-style Barbasol can to smuggle some dino embryos out of Jurassic Park. And when Dodson shows him how it works, this happens.
It's great. Oh, you guys.
It's cool to compartmentalize inside.
You guys, oh, that's great.
Customs can even check it if they want to.
Let me see.
Go on.
Oh.
There's enough coolant inside for 36 hours.
No menthol?
Okay, what the fuck was that? Why did a cartoon sound effect just come flying out of his mush right now? And Dodson also shows him that it has real shaving cream inside of it. And Nedry just puts it on a piece of pie like it's whipped cream. Is he still planning on eating this shaving cream pie? I don't know. And this little invention is nice, but I don't think it would work today. I mean, you can't bring a can of shaving cream like this on a plane. And even if you could, it wouldn't make it through the x-rays. But whatever, it's 1993, the year everything peaked. And then the check comes, and Nedry never even asked for it, but I guess these Costa Rican waiters are probably sick of this glutton ordering food and putting shaving cream on it, so they want him to get the hell out. And Nedry looks at Dodson and says, "Don't get cheap on me, Dodson," expecting him to pick up the check. And that's basically Nedry's whole character. He wants money, and Hammond is apparently not paying him enough, despite constantly telling people that he spared no expense. And then we jump to a helicopter in mid-flight. It's carrying Hammond, Grant, Ellie, Gennaro, and a new face, Dr. Ian Malcolm, is introduced. He's a mathematician. And why a mathematician has been recruited to give an endorsement of a dinosaur theme park, I don't know. I guess he's just so good at math, they had to bring him along. And why is he wearing all black leather to a tropical island? I mean, we don't know. I guess he's just that cool. And he pretty much immediately starts hitting on Ellie, as you do. And get used to it, because that's going to be happening a lot. And I like that Grant doesn't even really care. Like, he's secure enough to not care about this slick nerd hitting on his girlfriend. Although, maybe he should care. Because he keeps doing weird shit like this.
Yo. Yo. Yo.
Frightening, is it not? And weird. But it's good weird. And they approach the island. And they start to land. Grant tries to buckle his seatbelt, but he can't. He has two, I guess you could call them female ends, and he just kind of ties them together to make it work. And Malcolm smiles at that, as if to say, yep, I knew nothing in this park was going to work. Although I gotta wonder if Grant just simply had the wrong end, like maybe he has Ellie's buckle instead of his own. Who knows? In any case, they hop in some Jeeps and drive for a while until they run into their first dinosaur. And it's a doozy. It's a massive Brachiosaurus. And the CGI is pretty good for the time. This is 1993, remember. I mean, it's incredible. And of course, this is a herbivore, which I guess means that it's no threat. But you know, there are animals that are herbivores that are still very dangerous. I mean, the fucking hippo eats salads, but it still sees humans and thinks, you know what? Fuck you. So I don't know why they just automatically assume they're safe around these giant dinosaurs, just because they don't eat meat. All that really means is that some of them may just want to kill for sport. And of course, Grant and Ellie are amazed. They had no idea they were going to be seeing a real dinosaur. And Grant asks, how fast are they? And Hammond says they clocked the T-Rex at 32 miles an hour, which is odd because Grant was clearly asking about these dinosaurs, not T-Rexes. And of course, he and Ellie are surprised and shocked that they have a T-Rex. Grant has a little bit of a panic attack, and then he asks how Hammond managed to do this. And my question is more of a why than a how, but okay. And they take the Jeeps to a sort of central compound, which seems to double as a museum. And they sit down and watch a goofy presentation about how the dinosaurs were made. They were cloned using dinosaur DNA extracted from mosquitoes that were frozen in amber. And I don't know if I've ever seen exposition done quite like this. I mean, it's literally a presentation. It's a TED Talk. And apparently the DNA isn't perfect. They had to fill in the blanks with frog DNA, which might explain why the dinosaurs don't have feathers when they probably should. And it seems a little weird that we're able to use DNA extracted from mosquitoes to create such a variety of species. Like, you would think that you wouldn't be able to pick and choose what dinosaurs to create based on these random mosquitoes found in amber. And it also doesn't explain the prehistoric plant life they've also managed to recreate. I mean, what are the mosquitoes sucking on plant juices too? And they get a look at the scientists working on the cloning process. And Gennaro asks a really stupid question.
Are these characters erotica?
No. We have no animatronics here. No. Those people are the real miracle workers of Jurassic Park.
I mean, what the fuck? He just asked if these obviously real human beings are autoerotica. The hero of the book, ladies and gentlemen.
Think about it, hero!
And they make their way over to some raptor eggs, which are in the process of hatching. Hammond says they imprint on the first creature they see, and that he's been present for the birth of every living creature on this island, which sounds like bullshit to me. And the lead scientist, Dr. Henry Wu, tells everyone that these animals can't breed in the wild because they've been purposely engineered to be born female. But Malcolm isn't buying it.
Life will not be contained. Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but, well, there it is.
There it is.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life, finds a way.
And I like Dr. Wu's little pencil raise when he says that. And Grant is kind of shocked and appalled to find out that these are raptors. Like, it's one thing to clone dinosaurs, but why did you have to clone the deadliest ones that ever existed? And then they take a ride over to the raptor paddock and they meet Robert Muldoon. He introduces himself by saying all the raptors should be destroyed. So the dude who works for the park is not even endorsing it. And he goes on to say that the raptors are lethal by the time they're 8 months old. And they have the speed of a cheetah, 50 or 60 miles an hour. Now, I'm even more confused by Hammond's comment about the T-Rex being clocked at 32 miles an hour than before, because it's not even the fastest bitch on this island. So I don't even know why he brought up the T-Rex. And Muldoon also says the raptors show extreme problem-solving intelligence. And after they feed the raptors a live cow, they decide to go have lunch, as you do. And Gennaro is having a ball. He loves this place. He thinks they should charge tourists $10,000 a day. My hero. And Malcolm is disgusted by all of this. He says Hammond's scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. And Hammond counters Malcolm's argument poorly by saying this.
Condors. Condors are on the verge of extinction. If I was to create a flock of condors on this island, you wouldn't have anything to say.
No, hold on. This isn't some species that was obliterated by deforestation or the building of a dam. Dinosaurs had their shot, and nature selected them for extinction.
Pretty stupid argument when you think about it, because condors are not going to make humans or other unnatural prey part of their diet. And Hammond goes on to say that he doesn't understand this Luddite attitude, especially from a scientist, which just shows that he's not even hearing Malcolm's argument. He's not saying anything against technology or progress. He's just criticizing the unethical misuse of technology. And Malcolm says, what you call discovery, I call the rape of the natural world. And I think I've used those exact words, except I was talking about Star Trek Discovery, as opposed to just general discovery. What can I say? I can be a little dramatic. And Grant and Ellie seem to agree with Malcolm. I don't know whether they were convinced by his speech or they came to this conclusion on their own. But either way, the only one on Hammond's side is the blood-sucking lawyer.
Thank you.
And then Hammond's grandkids are introduced, Lex and Tim, and they're also going on the tour. And they are annoying. Tim is a Dr. Grant fanboy. He read his book, and Grant could not care less. He's actually kind of a jerk to the kid, which is consistent with the character, as we know. And they hop into these Ford Explorers that run automatically on a track, and they prepare to go on the official Jurassic Park tour. And while all this is going on, a storm is approaching, and most of the island's personnel have either left or they're in the process of leaving. Why Hammond decided to provide this real-life dinosaur tour for scientists without a full staff, I'll never know. And Nedry is also at his post. Everyone is unaware that he intends to betray them. And he argues with Hammond once more about finances. Hammond doesn't think Nedry is doing a good enough job, and Nedry thinks he's doing such a good job that he should be paid more, despite the fact that what he's actually doing is selling out the company to the highest bidder. But it's kind of funny that Hammond always says he spared no expense, but he seems to have a budget when it comes to the one info and tech guy. I don't really get it. So basically they're both assholes is what I'm trying to say. And the tour pulls up to the Dilophosaurus enclosure, and there's no sign of it. And everyone is disappointed. And the next exhibit is the T-Rex, which is kind of nuts. I mean, who designed this tour? You're going to have the T-Rex as the second stop on a list? That's got to be the main event. In any case, it doesn't really matter because the T-Rex is also a no-show. They bring out a goat to try to draw the T-Rex's attention, but nothing happens. So far, Jurassic Park is a failure, and it's only going to get worse. It's also kind of funny that they fed 3 raptors an entire cow, but a giant T-Rex gets one small goat. Doesn't make much sense to me. And the tour, such as it is, continues, and Malcolm and Ellie get to talking, specifically about chaos theory. He pinches her hair, which is weird, and he does some kind of water trick where he puts a drop of water on her hand, and he does it again to show that the drop won't roll in the same direction twice. And I'm sure that the bouncing, moving vehicle they're in has no impact on the outcome of this test at all. But suddenly, Grant gets out of the car.
Look at this. See? I'm right again. Nobody could have predicted that Dr. Grant would suddenly jump out of a moving vehicle.
Alan?
There's another example. See, here I'm now by myself, talking to myself. That's chaos theory.
I think Malcolm is easily my favorite character in the movie. He has all the best dialogue. He acts like he's the smartest guy in the room, and that's because he is. It's just great. Anyway, Grant and the group come across a sick Triceratops. In the book, I believe it's a Stegosaurus, which unfortunately we don't get to see until the sequel. So the only dinosaur they actually get to see on this tour is a dying Triceratops that I don't even think they were supposed to see in the first place. This park is a complete disaster, and I'm going to get my 10 grand back, even if I have to choke it out of Gennaro. And apparently, the Triceratops ate or came into contact with a poisonous plant that they just assumed the animals would stay away from. It just further shows how discombobulated this park is. There's no way to even see these animals. There's poisonous plant life that they're eating, and this fuckhead wants to charge 10 grand a day. In any case, Ellie examines the Triceratops droppings.
That is one big pile of shit.
It really is one big pile of shit. It seems like it's even higher than the Triceratops' asshole would be. So this thing just took a Randy Marsh dump out here in the jungle right now. And Ellie finds no sign of the poisonous plant in the dino poop. So I have no idea what the point of this was. I think in the book it goes into further detail, but I can't remember exactly what it was. Either way, they have to cut the tour short because the storm is coming. So they all head back to the cars, except for Ellie, who decides to stay behind with the Triceratops, and she says she'll catch a ride back to headquarters with one of the park employees. And it's at this point Nedry decides to make his move. He makes an excuse to leave, and it's kind of hilarious. He asks if anyone wants a soda, and he says, and I quote, he's going to the vending machine because he's had all these sweets, so he thought he'd get something salty. Hey guys, excuse me while I run to the vending machine to get a salty soda. I mean, he really didn't need to go into this much detail because no one seems to care. And he also says that he's in the process of debugging the security systems and that they may shut off and come back on periodically. But in reality, he's shutting them down so he can gain access to the embryos undetected. I'm not sure why he couldn't just shut that room down and maybe a few other minor ones to make it less obvious, but no, he decides to shut down basically the whole park. And he grabs the embryos, he puts them in the Barbasol can, and you can notice that a lot of the dinosaur names are spelled wrong. I think that might be intentional because there's just a lot of stuff in this movie that is constantly showing how nothing is done properly in this park. In any case, the fences are failing, and Nedry drives through the storm. He only has 15 minutes to get to a nearby dock so he can catch the last ship out of here. And by this point, he's probably down to about 7 or 8 minutes. And meanwhile, the tour gets stuck at the T-Rex enclosure. And the cars are on the same electrical track, so I don't understand how they could be heading back the same way on the same track. I mean, if this was fully open to the public, wouldn't they just be running into more cars that are just starting out on the tour? I don't know. And it's pouring rain at this point, and Lex notices that the goat is gone. And then it appears, or at least some of it does, on the roof of the car. And the T-Rex is also here, and it touches the fence, indicating that it's no longer electrified. And Gennaro is in the car with Lex and Tim, and he runs out of the vehicle into a nearby bathroom, which appears to be made out of bamboo and wood chips.
He left us. He left us.
Now, where does he think he's going? When you gotta go, you gotta go.
My hero.
That's the guy. That's the hero.
And Grant tells Malcolm to keep absolutely still because the T-Rex's vision is based on movement. How the fuck does he know that? And even if it was true 65 million years ago, how does he know it's still true? Because remember, this fucking thing apparently has frog DNA. I mean, maybe I'm wrong and this is actually based on some real-life scientific evidence, but I don't think Grant should know how a T-Rex sees. And while he can tell Malcolm to keep still, he can't do the same for the kids because they're in the other car, obviously. And for some inexplicable reason, Lex grabs a giant flashlight and starts shining it in the direction of the T-Rex. I don't understand the thought process there. I'll tell you what, if we're on a dinosaur tour and you start shining a flashlight at a loose T-Rex, I'm kicking you out of the car. That's all there is to it. You can go wait in the toilet with the blood-sucking lawyer for all I care. And of course, the T-Rex attacks their car and flips it over. It's a problem. And Grant digs up a flare in the backseat of his car, and he gets the T-Rex's attention. And I like how the T-Rex responds to Grant. You know, he says, hey, and the T-Rex is like, what? What do you want? Can't you see I'm eating?
I'm on my fucking lunch break, okay?
And Grant throws the flare, and the T-Rex follows. It worked nicely, but for some reason, Malcolm also has a flare, and now the T-Rex is chasing him. But he's moving when he finally throws the flare away, so the T-Rex just continues chasing him right into the bamboo bathroom. And that's the end of Gennaro.
You're a real hero.
And I know that I described Gennaro as a hero in the book multiple times for the sake of a joke. But that's not entirely true. He does do some heroic things, and he even makes it off the island, but he is still partially responsible for the creation of the park. And he eventually dies of dysentery. So both versions of the character likely died on the toilet. So that's nice. And I also like how you briefly see Malcolm flying through the bathroom, and it looks like he's being launched out of this animal's nasal cavity. I mean, what is going on here? It's like he's doing a swan dive into the toilet right now. Here's to swimming with bow-legged nerds, I guess. And once she's done eating Gennaro, the T-Rex returns to attack Grant, who is in the process of trying to get Lex and Tim out of their car. He's got Lex, but Tim is still stuck inside. It's a whole fiasco. And Lex and Grant manage to climb down a rope into the enclosure, and the T-Rex pushes the car with Tim inside of it over the cliff, and it falls into a tree. No idea why there's suddenly a cliff. I mean, the goat was inside the paddock, and it was on ground level with the vehicles. But now there's suddenly this huge drop. I don't get it. And then the T-Rex just kind of roars triumphantly and leaves, which is kind of miraculous. And back in the control room, Hammond asks Muldoon to take a jeep and bring back his grandchildren. Ellie, who is now also here, volunteers to go with Muldoon. And Chief Engineer Ray Arnold, who is played by a very pre-famous Samuel L. Jackson, says that he can't get the park back online without Dennis Nedry, who, at this point, has just crashed his Jeep and is hung up on a log. He tries to use the winch to free it, but he slips and falls down a hill, and he loses his glasses. But he's not worried, because he can afford more glasses. And then he runs into a little Dilophosaurus, and this might be my favorite dinosaur in the entire franchise. It was a no-show on the tour, but it's here now. Nedry tries to get rid of it by throwing a stick in the hopes that it will chase it, as if it's going to play fetch. And the Dilophosaurus isn't buying it. It's like he's saying, "What do you think, I'm as stupid as a T-Rex?" And Nedry says he doesn't have any food on him. And the Dilophosaurus looks at him as if to say, "I don't know about that. Looks like you got a lot of food on you. In fact, I'm about to eat for a fucking week." And when Nedry tries to get back up the hill to his Jeep, the Dilophosaurus deploys its frills and spits at him. I mean, holy shit. A big flower just flew out of this thing's neck, and it fucking gobbed on Nedry's chest. What is happening right now? This thing is like a poisonous peacock. And it spits again, and this time it hits Nedry right in the face. And when he finally collects himself and gets back into the Jeep, the Dilophosaurus is just sitting in the passenger seat. I mean, holy shit, these things seem just as smart as the Raptors. And they're cuter, in my opinion. Sort of. Cute is a very abstract term in Jurassic Park. And when I was a kid, I had the little Dilophosaurus toy from this movie, and it spit water. It was amazing. Maybe that's why it's kind of my favorite dinosaur from the movie, because I just have fond memories of that stupid toy. Needless to say, it was a simpler time. Anyway, Nedry is dead. So much for those embryos. And at the time, everyone thought that the Barbasol can was going to be a big part of the sequel. I think just because the camera holds on it getting covered in some mud for a long time. But the embryos can only survive inside the can for 36 hours. And even that sounds like a bit of a stretch. So I guess it's kind of a moot point. And Ellie and Muldoon pull up to the T-Rex paddock, and they find Malcolm. His leg is badly injured, but he's otherwise okay. And they have no time to look for the others, because the T-Rex is coming back. It chases them, and it keeps up for quite a while. Which is odd, because as we know, Hammond said they clocked this thing at 32 miles an hour. But somehow, this Jeep on a flat road is having trouble reaching that speed. To be fair, part of the problem is Malcolm leaning on the stick, but I still think that it shouldn't be that difficult to outrun this thing. I mean, I have trouble not going over 30 miles an hour when that's the speed limit, so I don't really get it. Then again, just because they clocked it at 32 miles an hour doesn't necessarily mean that that is as fast as it goes. So, who knows? But eventually they do outrun it, and they make it back to the control room, and Hammond has a bright idea. He wants to manually shut down the park and restart it as a way to bypass Nedry's lockout. Sort of sounds like doing a factory reset on your computer when you can't remember the password. And Muldoon mentioned something called the lysine contingency. Basically, the dinosaurs have all been engineered to not produce lysine, and unless they are supplied with it, they'll die. I don't even know why this dialogue is in the movie, because it has no impact on anything. I'm not even sure why he brings it up in this situation, because it's not like it helps them. Even if it's true, it just means the dinosaurs will eventually die, but it does nothing to help them right now. In any case, Mr. Arnold reluctantly agrees to shut down the system, and he says, "Hold on to your butts." And it works. But the shutdown tripped the circuit breaker, so in order for it to actually work, they need to turn on the circuit breakers manually. And of course, they're on the other end of the compound in a maintenance shed. I mean, this is like if the circuit breaker for your house was 5 minutes away on foot. Who designed this park? It's dog shit. So, Arnold heads to the maintenance shed on his own, which makes no fucking sense. The buddy system is paramount. But whatever. In the meantime, Hammond is still pretty delusional. He has hopes of the park eventually working out, and he compares the issue to Disneyland when it first opened.
This is just a delay. That's all it is. All major theme parks had delays. When they opened Disneyland in 1956, nothing worked.
Yeah, but John, if the Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists.
Once again, the logic of Ian Malcolm is unmatched. At least when he's not trying to distract a giant dinosaur that's already been distracted. And it's been too long since Arnold left, so Ellie wants to go after him. But Muldoon says it's not like you can just stroll down the road. Which is fucking stupid, because nobody had a problem with Arnold just strolling down the road. And Muldoon says he'll escort Ellie. Why didn't he do that with Arnold? I don't get it. And they're going to take walkie-talkies to keep in contact. Again, why the fuck didn't they at least give Arnold a walkie-talkie? They had absolutely no problem with letting Samuel L. Jackson walk out of this compound into a forest full of dinosaurs alone, unarmed, with no form of communication. Makes no sense. And then Hammond says something kind of weird. He seems to suggest that it should be him going instead of Ellie, because he's a man and she's a woman. He doesn't actually say that, but it's heavily implied. I mean, come on, dude. You're 1,000 years old, and you walk with a limp. And Ellie is like 30 years old, and she's a dinosaur expert, so it makes no sense that he even floated that as an idea. So Muldoon and Ellie head out, leaving Malcolm alone with Hammond. And I know they all have to work together to get out of this situation, but I have to imagine that Malcolm absolutely despises Hammond by this point. Malcolm has been right about everything, and Hammond has been wrong about everything. And while all this is going on, Grant has managed to get Tim out of the car and the tree in a really stupid way, because they climb down the tree while the car is threatening to crush them, when it seems like they could have just climbed to the other side of the tree and then climbed down. But whatever, it's a tense scene. Lex gets sneezed on by a big long-necked bastard. So we got shit humor and booger humor. So that's nice. And Tim calls Lex a nerd. But we find out that she prefers to be called a hacker. And I think in 1993, anyone that was capable of using a computer was considered a hacker by Hollywood. I mean, she calls herself a hacker, but there will be no hacking whatsoever in this movie. She eventually uses a computer, and that's considered hacking, I guess. And they come across some hatched raptor eggs, which of course is problematic. The thing that they specifically said would not happen just fucking happened. Malcolm was right once again. Life found a way. And Grant believes that it must have something to do with the frog DNA. He says West African frogs can change sex from male to female in a single-sex environment. Why didn't he bring this up when they initially mentioned frog DNA? I'll never know. Either way, once again, Jurassic Park scientists done goofed. And I'm guessing the lack of lysine is no longer a problem either. And they run into a flock of dinosaurs evading a T-Rex, and they take cover behind a log while the T-Rex eats one of the dinosaurs. And I'm sad now because there's this little dude in the background looking on, and he's like, oh man, that was my friend. Tragic. And Ellie and Muldoon make their way to the maintenance shed, and they come across a raptor enclosure, and it turns out that they've escaped. Must have happened when they restarted the system, because Muldoon says even Nedry knew enough to not turn off the raptor fences. And this is scary, because I'm willing to bet they were probably still in the paddock when Arnold came past this point. But they probably smelled him and broke out and followed him. And Muldoon says they're being hunted. How exciting. And he tells Ellie to run for the maintenance shed because he has an eye on one of the raptors. But he seems to think that he only has one raptor to worry about, which is pretty dumb. And he's about to learn just how dumb, because when he squares up his shot, another raptor creeps out of the bushes next to him and kills him. Tragic. Rest in peace, Muldoon. And Ellie makes it to the shed and calls out for Mr. Arnold, but no one answers. And Hammond and Malcolm use the blueprints and the walkie-talkie to guide Ellie to the circuit breaker. She finds it and begins powering up various sections of the park one at a time. And as this is happening, Grant and company approach an electrical fence and they begin to climb over it. Although the holes in the fence definitely seem big enough for Lex and Tim to crawl through. Either way, Lex and Grant make it over the side just fine, but Tim is lagging behind. And a warning light is indicating that the fence is powering up. Grant tells Tim that he has to jump and that he'll catch him, even though Grant is standing nowhere near close enough to catch him if he did jump. Either way, it doesn't matter because he doesn't jump, the fence powers up, and it sends Tim flying. I don't know if he could have survived this. My first thought is no way, because the fence is designed to deter creatures that are a lot bigger than Tim. Plus, he also flew 30 feet through the air and landed on his back. So yeah, he probably should be dead. But thankfully, he's not. Grant does a little CPR on Tim, and he wakes up and he's just fine, apparently. It's a fucking miracle. And needless to say, the power is back on. Ellie is pretty happy about it, briefly, but then she's suddenly attacked by a raptor. And I think Hammond's hubris is starting to rub off on Ellie, because just before this, she says, I think we're back in business, as though this whole thing is still salvageable. But she quickly comes to her senses now that she's being attacked by a fucking raptor. And as she backs away from the raptor, a random arm just falls on her. And it's Arnold's arm. But where the fuck did it come from? Why did a severed arm just fall onto Ellie? I have no idea what's happening right now. Either way, I guess he forgot to hold on to his butt, because that shit is long gone. And Ellie barely escapes the shed. No idea why she's running with a limp right now, but she seems to be okay for the moment, at least physically. Mentally, she's fucked. And Grant reaches the complex and he drops off Lex and Tim so he can go look for Ellie and the others, which seems a little irresponsible. 2 frightened kids, one of which was just fried by an electric fence designed to stun a 15,000-pound prehistoric creature, and he's just going to leave the kid here. Okay. He heads out and he just starts calling for Ellie, which seems inadvisable. But luckily, she's not far. She sees Grant, and for some reason, she says run. I'm not sure why she says that. Does she want Grant to run? Or is she trying to encourage herself to run to him? I don't know. I'm clearly overanalyzing and nitpicking because she's had a rough day. And she was just attacked by a dinosaur and a disembodied human arm. What do you say we give her a break? Meanwhile, the kids are getting some food when some raptors show up. And there's a dramatic close-up on Lex as she eats her fucking green jello and it's shaking. Is she scared or has she developed a sudden neurological disorder? Who's to say? Anyway, she and Tim hide in the kitchen, which is fitting because the raptors are looking for dinner. But they manage to evade them in what is a very tense scene the first time you watch it. And they end up locking one of the raptors inside of a freezer, which is probably going to be a pretty torturous death for the raptor. It's just like another ice age for that fucker. And Tim and Lex make it outside, they run into Ellie and Grant, and they all head to the control room. But the remaining raptors follow them, and they have trouble keeping them out because the door locks aren't activated, and raptors can open doors. So Grant and Ellie are trying to hold the door shut, and Ellie says she can't reach the gun because she can't move, which is kind of stupid because she can move. She's on the total wrong side of the door to be holding it shut. Grant is the only one with any kind of leverage, so Ellie could probably just go grab the gun. Meanwhile, Lex uses her world-famous hacking abilities to operate this 1993 compact Presario, and she says it's a Unix system, which I guess it is, but it seems to have a lot more bells and whistles than is necessary. I mean, it looks like the start menu of some kind of Sega Genesis game, but whatever. She's the hacker, so I'm sure she knows what she's doing. Although her hand placement on this mouse is very bizarre. Who holds a mouse like that? You know what this is? This is a 90s hand that is new to computers. That's what's going on here. Anyway, it works. She finds the appropriate files and powers up the park once and for all. The door locks engage, and they are safe for the moment. They call Hammond and tell him the phones are working, so he should probably call the mainland and get a chopper over here now. But they have to cut the phone call short because the raptor breaks through the glass, and I guess shooting it did nothing because Grant leaves the weapon behind as they all go tearing ass out. They climb into the vents, and Grant kicks the ladder away. Like, just in case these fuckers can climb a ladder, I better get rid of it. And they end up crashing down in the lobby, and the raptors are closing in. There's an incredibly dramatic close-up on Laura Dern, which I think is kind of unintentionally hilarious. And just when it looks like the raptors are about to chow down, the T-Rex shows up and kills both raptors. I mean, where the fuck did this thing come from? They are inside of a building. There does seem to be an opening behind it, but it's still very weird to have a T-Rex sneak up on anyone. In every scene involving the T-Rex, there are ground tremors right before it shows up. But here, it just kind of tippy-toed inside and fucked everybody up. And I just love its triumphant roar. It's like it's saying, yes, I know I have tiny arms, but I don't give a shit. You know why? Because I'm a fucking pimp. I'm the king. Nobody fucks with me. I don't even need big arms. In fact, don't even look at them. My eyes are up here. It's the law of the jungle. Anyway, Grant and company run outside, and Hammond pulls up in a Jeep with Malcolm in the back. Grant says he's decided not to endorse the park, and they get to the helicopter and escape. It's a relatively happy ending. Grant has realized that he doesn't hate kids as much as he thought he did. He's kind of the only character with an arc in the movie. And the John Williams score kicks in. Grant looks at some birds, which is fitting, signals that life does indeed find a way, and it may eventually find a way off this island. But that's the movie. Overall, outstanding. It's iconic. And if you were to pick a handful of movies to kind of represent the 90s, I think Jurassic Park would absolutely be one of them. And this was still at a point where Steven Spielberg pretty much always delivered. He was working on this movie at the same time he was working on Schindler's List. I Two movies that couldn't possibly be more different. Needless to say, this was like the height of his popularity. And the special effects still hold up for the most part. The dinosaurs still look about as real as they can possibly be. And the characters are great. It's very similar to Jaws in that way. Obviously, the dinosaurs function much better than the shark did in Jaws, but the tension is very similar to Jaws. And the characters seem fully formed and likable. And they have good chemistry. The only character I find a little questionable is Hammond. I kind of love him and hate him at the same time. Whereas in the book, you kind of just hate him. He's much more of an asshole in the book. But this version of Hammond is just kind of this unassuming, nice grandpa who just did this horrible thing by mistake. And at one point, he's talking to Ellie, and he talks about how he started off with a flea circus. And he just wanted to give children something more real, something they can see and touch. So he went from imaginary fleas to resurrecting prehistoric carnivores. That's quite a leap. And it's just kind of a dick move. And he should probably be in jail. That aspect doesn't come into play in the book because he doesn't even survive the novel. Spoiler alert. But since the movie version of Hammond does survive, I have to imagine he's facing a multitude of legal and financial issues. I mean, there is quite literally no law to fit his crime. Either way, he's a character that kind of bugs me. But in general, it's a movie that I'll always appreciate. I saw it when I was 9 years old, as I said, and for a little while, it had almost a Star Wars effect on me. You know, I was that into it. And I was really into the tie-in game for the Sega Genesis. That was like a top-tier game for a while for me. It was one of those rare games to be based on a movie that was actually pretty good. With few exceptions, games based on movies tend to suck, and movies based on games tend to suck. So it kind of goes both ways. But this was a good video game based on a movie. And when I first got it, I got it for Christmas that year, and I didn't even have a Sega Genesis yet. So when I opened the game, it was kind of a shock because I knew that also meant there was a Sega Genesis somewhere among these presents. And there was. Needless to say, that was a really good Christmas. And they've kind of all been downhill since then. And unfortunately, I think Jurassic Park is probably something that shouldn't have been a franchise. Or at least not a franchise with this many entries. I mean, honestly, there's not that many good sequels to this movie. In fact, they kind of range from okay to just terrible, in my opinion. You know, The Lost World is okay, I think. It has exciting moments, and Jeff Goldblum is the star, so what could be bad? But it also has a kid doing gymnastics who, like, knocks out a raptor. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy shit in that one. And the third one is fucked up, too, because I don't know. The third one is just bizarre because it just ends with the military showing up at the end and they just shoot the dinosaurs. There's also a talking dinosaur in a dream sequence. The third one's not great either. And of course, the Chris Pratt movies are, I don't know. I don't know what to make of them. I think it's time for the franchise to end. That's basically what I'm trying to say. But needless to say, I love this particular movie, and let me know how you feel about it. And until next time, take it easy.
That's why dinosaurs don't exist no more.
Wasn't it a meteor?
They're all meat eaters.
Meteor.
Take it easy.